The paramedic leaned close during transport and said, "This ambulance isn't going to a hospital." I tried to lift my head, but pain exploded through my skull. The ambulance interior swam in and out of focus, fluorescent lights too bright against white metal walls. My neck was in a brace, my left arm strapped down with an IV line running into my vein. The paramedic hovering over me wasn't the one who'd loaded me onto the gurney after the car accident. This was a woman maybe 40 years old with graying hair pulled back tight and eyes that held something between pity and urgency. She checked the IV bag hanging above me, then leaned down so her face was inches from mine. "My name is Gloria Vasquez. I've worked as a paramedic for 15 years, and I need you to listen very carefully. You're Dr. Samantha Holt. You work at Riverside Medical Center in oncology research. 3 days ago, you filed a complaint with the state medical board about discrepancies in patient records. Tonight, your car was forced off the road by a black SUV near the hospital parking structure. That wasn't an accident." My mouth felt dry, tongue thick. I managed to whisper, "What are you talking about?" Gloria glanced toward the front of the ambulance where I could hear the driver speaking quietly on a radio. She pulled something from her pocket and held it where I could see, a hospital ID badge with my photo and name, Dr. Samantha Holt, Oncology Research Division. "I took this from your purse before the other paramedics could. You need to understand what's happening. This ambulance is registered to Riverside Medical Center, but it's not part of the regular emergency fleet. The driver works for hospital administration. The destination programmed into the GPS isn't any hospital I recognize." My mind struggled to process what she was saying through the fog of pain and confusion. I remembered leaving work late, remembered headlights behind me as I drove through the parking garage, remembered impact and glass shattering, and then nothing until waking up in this ambulance. "Why would the hospital—" I started, but Gloria cut me off. "Because you figured it out. The discrepancies in patient records weren't clerical errors. They were evidence of systematic fraud. Cancer patients being overcharged for treatments they never received. Insurance companies being billed for experimental drugs that were never administered. Clinical trial data being falsified to show success rates that would guarantee pharmaceutical company funding. You saw the pattern and you reported it to people who should have investigated. Instead, they reported you to the people running the scheme." She showed me another item from my purse, a flash drive. "Is this what I think it is?" I nodded weakly. The flash drive contained 6 months of documentation. Patient files showing treatments billed but not administered, pharmacy records showing drug inventories that didn't match prescription logs, financial records I'd copied from the research division's servers showing payments from a pharmaceutical company called Apex Biomed that corresponded with falsified clinical trial results. I'd spent half a year gathering evidence before filing my complaint, thinking the proper channels would lead to investigation and reform. Instead, apparently, they'd led to attempted murder disguised as a car accident and now abduction disguised as emergency medical transport. Gloria pocketed the flash drive and checked my vital signs with practiced efficiency. "Your injuries aren't life-threatening. Concussion, possible fractured ribs, lacerations. You need medical attention, but you don't need whatever they're planning to give you wherever this ambulance is going." She adjusted something on the IV line and I noticed she'd placed a small clamp that restricted the flow. "I've slowed the drip. They have you on something that's keeping you sedated and compliant. If I stop it completely, the driver will notice on his monitoring system, but this will buy you time to think clearly." My head was already starting to feel less foggy, thoughts becoming sharper and more focused despite the pain. "Why are you helping me?" Gloria's expression hardened. "Because my daughter was a patient at Riverside, stage 3 breast cancer. She was enrolled in a clinical trial for a new targeted therapy drug. The trial results showed an 80% response rate, so she was hopeful, excited even. The drug was supposed to be cutting edge, developed by Apex Biomed specifically for her type of cancer. But she kept getting sicker despite the treatments. The oncologist kept saying the drug needed time to work, that her case was complicated. She died 4 months into the trial." Gloria's voice remained steady, but her hands were trembling as she checked the IV line again. "After she died, I requested her medical records. There were inconsistencies in the documentation, dates that didn't match my visits, drug dosages that seemed wrong. I asked questions and was told grieving families often misremember details. I was told to accept that cancer is unpredictable and sometimes treatments fail despite best efforts. But I never stopped wondering if my daughter received the experimental drug at all, or if she was part of a control group that was never properly documented, or if the whole trial was fraudulent from the beginning." The ambulance made a turn and I felt the change in momentum. Gloria steadied herself against the wall and continued talking quietly. 3 days ago, I saw your name on an internal memo that was accidentally left on a gurney during an emergency call to Riverside. The memo was from hospital administration to security, flagging you as a potential problem. It said you'd filed a complaint with the medical board and that the situation needed to be handled discreetly. I started paying attention after that. I volunteered for overnight shifts. I watched the parking structure where you park your car. When I saw the black SUV following you tonight, when I saw them force you off the road and then call for a specific ambulance instead of regular emergency services, I knew what was happening. So I switched places with the assigned paramedic. Told him there was a family emergency and I'd cover his shift. He didn't ask questions. I wanted to sit up, but my body wouldn't cooperate. "Where are we going?" Gloria checked her watch. Based on the route, I'd guess a private medical facility somewhere outside city limits, somewhere that isn't subject to standard emergency room protocols, somewhere they can treat your injuries in a way that creates the medical record they need. Maybe you die from complications of the accident. Maybe you have a stroke that leaves you unable to communicate. Maybe you develop an infection that causes brain damage. Whatever the outcome, you won't be able to testify about what you found, and your credibility will be destroyed if you try. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. I've been documenting everything. Photos of the SUV that hit you, license plate number, the ambulance identification numbers that don't match any legitimate emergency vehicle registration. I've sent copies to 3 different people: a journalist who specializes in medical fraud, a lawyer who handles whistleblower cases, and my ex-husband who works in the district attorney's office. If something happens to both of us tonight, at least someone will know the truth. The radio in front crackled and the driver's voice called back, "How's the patient?" Gloria responded with professional calm. "Stable. Vitals are good. She's sedated and unresponsive. ETA to facility?" The driver said 15 minutes. Gloria mouthed to me, "We need to move soon." She pulled medical scissors from her kit and carefully began cutting the straps that held me to the gurney. The IV line she left in place but showed me where the clamp was positioned. "When I give the signal, you need to pull this out yourself. It'll hurt and you'll bleed, but it's better than whatever sedative they're pumping into you." My mind raced through possibilities. What's the plan? Gloria finished cutting the last strap and positioned herself between me and the driver's line of sight. "In about 8 minutes, we'll cross an intersection near a 24-hour pharmacy. There's a red light there that lasts 90 seconds. If I time this right, the ambulance will have to stop. When it does, I'm going to convince the driver there's a medical emergency that requires his immediate attention. While he's distracted, you're going to open the back doors and run. The pharmacy has security cameras covering the parking lot. Get inside, tell them you're being kidnapped, and don't leave until actual police arrive. Not private security, not anyone claiming to be from the hospital. Real police with badge numbers you can verify." The plan sounded desperate and unlikely to succeed, but doing nothing meant letting them take me to wherever they'd planned to finish what the car accident had started. "What happens to you?" Gloria's expression was grim. "I'll deal with that when it comes. My daughter died because of these people. If I can save you, if I can help expose what they're doing, then maybe her death will mean something." The intersection appeared ahead through the ambulance's rear windows. I could see a red light and beyond it the bright lights of a pharmacy chain store. Gloria moved to the equipment cabinets and pulled out a portable defibrillator. She held it ready and watched the intersection approach. The ambulance slowed, stopped. Gloria immediately shouted toward the front, "Patient's crashing. I need you back here now." The driver's door opened and I heard footsteps running toward the rear. Gloria hit the control that opened the back doors from the inside just as the driver appeared. He was a large man in his 40s wearing a paramedic uniform that looked wrong somehow. Too new, too clean. His eyes went wide when he saw me sitting up on the gurney with the IV line dangling from my arm. "What the hell?" Gloria swung the defibrillator and connected with his jaw. He staggered back and she shoved him hard. He fell onto the pavement. I yanked out the IV line, ignoring the sharp pain and the blood running down my arm. My legs barely held my weight when I tried to stand, but adrenaline and desperation pushed me forward. I jumped from the ambulance and stumbled toward the pharmacy 50 yards away. Behind me, I heard Gloria shouting, heard the driver yelling into his radio, heard car doors slamming. The pharmacy's automatic doors opened and I nearly fell through them. A young clerk behind the counter stared at me in shock. A woman in torn, blood-stained clothes with a neck brace, bleeding from multiple lacerations, lurching toward the counter. "Call the police," I gasped. "I'm being kidnapped. Don't let anyone take me. Real police only." The clerk grabbed the phone while another employee, an older woman who moved with the confidence of someone who'd seen emergencies before, came around the counter and helped me sit down. "I'm a retired nurse," she said, examining my injuries. "What happened?" I tried to explain about the ambulance, about Gloria, about the hospital conspiracy, but the words came out jumbled and frantic. Through the store windows, I could see the ambulance driver standing near his vehicle, talking urgently on his phone. He wasn't coming after me, wasn't trying to force his way into the store. He was waiting for something. Or someone. The retired nurse whose name tag said Dorothy was applying pressure to the bleeding IV site on my arm when Gloria appeared at the pharmacy entrance. Her face was bruised and she was limping, but she was conscious and mobile. "Are the police coming?" Dorothy nodded. 5 minutes out. Gloria moved to the windows and looked out at the parking lot. Her expression darkened. "Make it faster. We have company." I followed her gaze and saw 2 black SUVs pulling into the parking lot, the same type of vehicle that had forced me off the road. Men in dark clothes emerged from both vehicles, 6 of them total, moving with military precision toward the pharmacy. They weren't wearing police uniforms or hospital security badges. They looked like private contractors, the kind of people corporations hired when they needed problems solved quietly and permanently. Dorothy saw them too and immediately moved to the entrance, locking the automatic doors manually. "I'm calling 911 again," she said, returning to the phone. "I'm telling them we have armed men attempting a forced entry." One of the men approached the locked doors and held up what looked like an official badge. He shouted through the glass, Hospital security, we're here to transport a patient who escaped from medical custody. Open the doors immediately. Gloria positioned herself between me and the entrance. Don't believe them. Those aren't real security officers. Look at their equipment, their weapons. That's private military contractor gear. The man at the door tried the handle again, then pulled out his phone. Through the glass, I could see him speaking to someone, his expression growing more frustrated. Two of his colleagues moved around the building's perimeter, checking for other entrances. The pharmacy suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. Dorothy returned from the phone. Police are 3 minutes out, but the dispatcher says there's been a report of a dangerous mental patient who escaped from Riverside Medical Center. They're being told we're harboring someone who's a threat to herself and others. The lie was elegant and effective. If police arrived expecting to find a delusional patient, they'd defer to the men outside who were claiming to be hospital security. I'd be sedated, restrained, and transported before anyone could verify the truth. We need evidence, I said, forcing my mind to work through the pain and fear. Gloria, you have documentation on your phone. Send it to the police dispatcher right now. Photos, text messages, everything. Make them understand what's really happening. Gloria was already typing. Doing it now, but we need more. We need proof that connects these men to the hospital, that shows this isn't a legitimate medical transport. I thought about the flash drive in Gloria's pocket. The files I copied from the hospital servers. There's a patient list showing people who were billed for treatments they never received. Is your daughter's name on that list? Gloria stopped typing and looked at me with sudden understanding. If she is, if we can prove the fraud wasn't random but targeted specific patients, if we can show that people died because they were denied real treatment while being charged for fake treatment. She pulled out the flash drive and handed it to Dorothy. Can you access this on one of your pharmacy computers? Dorothy took the drive and moved to a terminal near the prescription counter. Our system is linked to insurance databases for verifying coverage and prescriptions. If there's medical billing information on here, I should be able to cross-reference it. She inserted the drive and began navigating through files while Gloria and I watched the men outside. They were getting more aggressive, testing the strength of the locked doors, examining the windows for weak points. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension. 3 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot with lights flashing. Officers emerged from their vehicles and immediately approached the men in dark clothes. I couldn't hear the conversation through the glass, but I saw badges being shown, gestures toward the pharmacy, the familiar body language of law enforcement dealing with what they thought was a routine mental health crisis. One officer approached the pharmacy door and knocked. Dorothy looked up from the computer screen with an expression that sent hope flooding through me. I found it, she said quietly. Gloria, your daughter's name is on this list. Diana Vasquez, enrolled in a clinical trial for Apex Biomed's experimental targeted therapy drug. According to these records, she received 32 doses of the medication over 4 months at a cost of $18,000 per dose. Total billing to her insurance company was over $500,000. Gloria's face went pale. She never received 32 doses. I was with her for every appointment. She received maybe 15 treatments total, and the oncologist kept saying the doses were being reduced because of her reaction to the drug. Dorothy continued reading from the screen. According to the pharmacy inventory records here, the drug was never dispensed to your daughter at all. The prescriptions were filled, but the medication was signed out to a different patient code. The billing shows administration to Diana Vasquez, but the actual drug went to someone else. Your daughter was being charged for medication she never received, and the treatment she did receive was... Dorothy paused, checking another file. Standard chemotherapy, basic protocol drugs that cost a fraction of what the insurance company was being billed. The officer outside knocked again, more insistent. Gloria moved to the door and called through it. Officer, I need you to listen carefully. My name is Gloria Vasquez. I'm a licensed paramedic. The woman inside this pharmacy is Dr. Samantha Holt, a physician from Riverside Medical Center. She's not having a mental health crisis. She's a whistleblower who discovered systematic medical fraud, and the people outside claiming to be hospital security are attempting to abduct her to prevent her from providing evidence to authorities. I need you to verify their identities and credentials before you allow anyone to remove Dr. Holt from this location. The officer looked confused, glancing between Gloria, the men in dark clothes, and his colleagues. One of the men in dark clothes approached and spoke to the officer, showing documentation. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw the officer's posture change, becoming more uncertain, more cautious. Dorothy had been continuing to search through the files on the flash drive. She suddenly straightened up with an expression of shock. This goes beyond insurance fraud. According to these pharmaceutical company records, Apex Biomed was conducting a trial with 2 groups, patients who received the actual experimental drug, and a control group who received standard treatment while being billed as if they received the experimental drug. The control group's insurance companies paid for expensive medication that was never administered, and that money was split between the pharmaceutical company, the hospital, and individual doctors who falsified the records. But here's the worst part. The experimental drug was showing poor results in actual testing, so they needed a larger control group to dilute the failure rate. They deliberately enrolled terminal patients in the fake treatment group, charged them for drugs they never received, gave them minimal standard care, and then documented their deaths as inevitable outcomes of advanced cancer rather than medical negligence. Gloria's voice shook with rage. How many patients? Dorothy scrolled through the data. Over 300 across 18 months. Most of them are dead. The officer outside made a decision. He turned to the men in dark clothes and said something that made them step back. Then he spoke into his radio and 2 more police cruisers arrived within minutes. The officer knocked on the pharmacy door again and called out, Dr. Holt, I'm Lieutenant Raymond Pierce with the City Police Department. I've just spoken to my supervisor who confirmed that a journalist named Michael Ortega has been trying to reach us about medical fraud at Riverside Medical Center. He says he received evidence tonight from a paramedic named Gloria Vasquez. Is that you? Gloria responded through the door. Yes. And I have more evidence now. The pharmacist inside has accessed files from a flash drive that Dr. Holt compiled showing systematic fraud that resulted in hundreds of patient deaths. Lieutenant Pierce directed his officers to detain the men in dark clothes while he approached the pharmacy door. I'm going to need you to unlock this door so we can secure the scene and get Dr. Holt proper medical attention. I have an ambulance from County General Hospital on the way, not affiliated with Riverside. Can you do that? Dorothy looked at Gloria and me. We both nodded. She unlocked the door and Lieutenant Pierce entered with 2 other officers. One of them was a woman who immediately moved to assess my injuries while Pierce took statements from Gloria, Dorothy, and me. The men in dark clothes were placed in handcuffs and their credentials were being verified. Within 10 minutes, it became clear that none of them were licensed security officers. They carried private contractor identification from a company called Sentinel Solutions that provided security services to corporations and hospitals. Their weapons weren't standard law enforcement issue. They'd been hired by Riverside Medical Center through a third-party firm to handle a sensitive patient transport situation. When Lieutenant Pierce asked who had authorized the contract, the men refused to answer without lawyers present. The ambulance from County General arrived, and real paramedics, ones whose credentials Pierce personally verified, loaded me onto a gurney. Gloria rode with me this time, holding my hand as we were actually transported to a real hospital with real emergency room doctors who treated my injuries without attempting to sedate me into silence or manipulate my medical records. Pierce followed in his cruiser and stationed an officer outside my examination room. He told me the district attorney had been contacted and was opening an immediate investigation into Riverside Medical Center, Apex Biomed, and Sentinel Solutions. Over the next 6 hours, while doctors cleaned my wounds, set my fractured ribs, and monitored me for signs of serious head trauma, the investigation exploded into something that would eventually become the largest medical fraud case in the state's history. Michael Ortega, the journalist Gloria had contacted, published his initial story online within 2 hours of my arrival at County General. The headline read, Cancer patients charged for treatments they never received. Whistleblower survives attempted murder by hospital administrators. His article included photos Gloria had taken, documentation from the flash drive, and testimony from Dorothy about what we'd discovered in the pharmacy computers. By morning, news trucks were parked outside Riverside Medical Center, and reporters were demanding statements from hospital administration. By afternoon, federal agents had arrived to execute search warrants on the hospital's financial records, pharmaceutical inventory, and clinical trial documentation. Riverside's CEO, a man named Dr. Frederick Walsh, was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The head of oncology research, Dr. Nathan Briggs, was arrested attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with 3 suitcases full of financial records and a flash drive containing offshore bank account information. The head of pharmaceutical relations, a woman named Victoria Sterling, was found dead in her office from an apparent overdose of barbiturates, though investigators suspected it wasn't suicide given the circumstances. Apex Biomed's stock price crashed when news of the fraud became public. The company's CEO issued a statement denying knowledge of any impropriety and promising full cooperation with authorities. But emails discovered during the federal investigation showed he'd personally approved the fraudulent trial protocols and had received quarterly bonuses based on how many patients were enrolled in the fake treatment groups. I spent 3 days in County General under police protection while investigators interviewed me repeatedly about what I'd discovered and how I'd gathered the evidence. Gloria visited every day, sitting beside my bed and sharing stories about her daughter Diana. We cried together when the investigation confirmed that Diana had been deliberately denied the experimental treatment she'd been promised, that she died receiving only minimal standard care while her insurance company was billed over $500,000 for drugs she never received. Gloria filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Riverside, Apex Biomed, and Dr. Nathan Briggs personally. 318 other families joined her lawsuit when investigators published the full list of patients who'd been defrauded. The criminal cases took 18 months to reach trial. Dr. Briggs was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and negligent homicide in the deaths of 32 patients who could have survived with proper treatment. He received 25 years in federal prison. Dr. Walsh was convicted of fraud and conspiracy, but acquitted of homicide charges. He received 12 years. Victoria Sterling's death was ruled suspicious but remained officially classified as suicide after her family refused to cooperate with investigators. Sentinel Solutions faced federal charges for conspiracy and was dissolved as a corporation. Its founder, a former military contractor named Thomas Garrett, received 8 years for his role in organizing the attempted abduction. The 6 men who'd attempted to force entry into the pharmacy received various sentences ranging from 3 to 7 years. The driver of the fake ambulance, a man named Raymond Wu who'd been paid $5,000 for one night's work, turned state's evidence and received probation in exchange for testimony about how he'd been recruited. Apex Biomed filed for bankruptcy after losing the civil lawsuit. The families of defrauded patients received a settlement of $400 million, divided among the 318 victims. Gloria received $1.2 million for Diana's death, money she immediately donated to a foundation she established for investigating medical fraud and supporting whistleblowers. I received a settlement of $2 million from Riverside Medical Center for the attempted murder and the retaliation I'd faced for reporting fraud. I never returned to work at Riverside. The hospital was eventually sold to a nonprofit healthcare system that implemented new oversight protocols and transparency requirements. I took a position at a medical ethics board that investigates complaints about research protocols and clinical trial practices. My job now is to be what I wish had existed when I first discovered the fraud. Someone with authority and independence who takes whistleblowers seriously, who investigates properly, who doesn't let bureaucracy or institutional loyalty protect criminals. Gloria and I remained close. She continued working as a paramedic, but she also became an advocate for families who'd lost loved ones to medical fraud. She testified before congressional committees about the need for stronger oversight of clinical trials and stricter penalties for healthcare fraud. She gave interviews to journalists and documentary filmmakers. She made sure Diana's story, and the stories of the 317 other victims, weren't forgotten. Lieutenant Pierce received a commendation for his handling of the case. Dorothy received recognition from the State Pharmacy Board for her role in helping expose the fraud. Michael Ortega won multiple journalism awards for his reporting. Everyone involved in stopping the conspiracy became part of a network of people who understood that sometimes the system doesn't protect the vulnerable, that sometimes ordinary people have to risk everything to do what institutions should have done from the beginning. 5 years after that night in the ambulance, I spoke at a medical ethics conference about whistleblower protection and the importance of creating systems that respond appropriately when healthcare workers report fraud or malpractice. Gloria was in the audience, and afterward we had coffee and talked about how our lives had changed. She said she still thought about that night constantly, about the decision she'd made to switch places with another paramedic, about how close we'd both come to being silenced permanently. I told her I thought about it too, about waking up in that ambulance and hearing her whisper that we weren't going to a hospital, about the terror and confusion and then the desperate escape. We'd both lost things we couldn't get back. Gloria had lost her daughter and the innocence of believing that hospitals always put patients first. I'd lost my career at Riverside and the naive assumption that reporting fraud through proper channels would lead to proper investigation. But we'd also gained something. The knowledge that we'd stopped a conspiracy that was killing people, that we'd exposed systemic corruption, that we'd made the kind of difference that saves lives even if it destroys the lives of the people brave enough to act. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Gloria hadn't been paying attention that night, if she hadn't recognized my name from the administrative memo, if she hadn't been positioned to intercept the fake ambulance. I'd be dead, probably, or brain damaged, or so thoroughly discredited that my evidence would have been dismissed as the delusions of someone traumatized by a car accident. The fraud would have continued. More patients would have died. The system would have protected itself. Instead, Gloria saw what was happening and decided that one person with courage could make a difference, could change the outcome, could refuse to be complicit in evil even when refusing might cost everything. That night in the ambulance, when she leaned close and told me we weren't going to a hospital, she was offering me a choice: accept the fate others had planned for me, or fight back knowing the odds were terrible and the consequences potentially fatal. I chose to fight, and Gloria fought beside me, and together we won a battle that neither of us could have won alone. The paramedic leaned close during transport and said the ambulance wasn't going to a hospital. She was right, and that terrible truth saved both our lives and the lives of countless patients who would have been the next victims of a system that had learned to profit from suffering while disguising murder as medicine. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.